One of the biggest problems facing all of us is something I've been puzzling over for quite some time, and that is about how we understand misinformation and disinformation. So misinformation primarily is information that's presented to us and we just simply accept it as being factual. And there's an example I'm about to bring up in a moment, which we'll talk about that shortly. But basically it's about if you get information and you don't evaluate it, you simply share it, you see the stuff on X or Twitter and you just click on it and post it without actually checking out an article or where it came from or who's saying it and how it's been verified. If you do that, then that's just irresponsible, and you may be spreading just misinformation because your intent is not to provide damaging information about something. It's just that you've been misinformed. So I was given some information. I just accepted it for what it was. I shared it with my wife, but then later on I saw another bit of information which clearly told me that where this information was coming from was quite suspect, and I just automatically accepted it. And to me, that is me spreading misinformation from my perspective. My intent wasn't to hurt anybody. It was just a bit of information, and it was later on proved to be false, or at least the source was unknown. So we need to be wary and mindful of where this stuff is coming from. So I'm going to run through what misinformation and disinformation is to help us to understand, and to eventually I'm going to present a list of risk factors that we need to be mindful of so that we can kind of manage how we best understand misinformation and disinformation. So this is an article which I found quite helpful. So it's misinformation versus disinformation. Get involved on the difference. Information has real life consequences. It can be a literal lifesaver. Information about your health, information about a whole host of things by professionals, by people that know what they're talking about, can actually save your life. There's no disputing all of that. That is when it's true. Unfortunately, the opposite is also true. Untrue information can cause great harm. Like a virus, wrong information can spread, causing what's been called infodemic. Now, more than ever, we are experiencing the spread of two forms of wrong information: misinformation and disinformation. These two words, so often used interchangeably, are merely one letter apart. But behind that one letter hides the critical distinction between these confusing words. And this is important, it's intent. So what is the intent of the person who's presenting this information? So misinformation is false information that is spread regardless of intent to mislead. So that information that I had, I didn't want to mislead anybody, I just thought it was kind of factual, I guess. Later on found out that it wasn't. Put a flag in the second half of this definition, it will be important later. The spread of misinformation happens in everyday lives. We all do it. We human beings, newsflash, are not perfect. So we can all make mistakes. We all forget things, particularly when you're my age. We mishear or misremember details. We tell our friends something we heard on TV or saw on social media that wasn't really true. If you are spreading information that is wrong, but you don't know it's wrong, which is what I did recently, then you are, well, technically, you're spreading misinformation. And when we say misinformation is an everyday thing, we mean it. For example, say a party starts at 8 p.m, but you forget or misread the invitation and tell your friend it starts at 9 p.m. You are supplying them with misinformation. But don't fear, we're not calling the fact police on you either. The key here is that you unwittingly spread false information around. You didn't mean to, or you might have thought the information was true. So when we get down to disinformation though, disinformation means false information as about a country's military strength or plans disseminated by a government or intelligence agency in a hostile act of tactical political subversion. And I'm going to bring an example where Peter Dutton actually did this, and Jacinda Price did the same. It is also used more generally to mean deliberately misleading or biased information, manipulated narrative or facts. In other words, it's simply propaganda. So disinformation is information that is knowingly, intentionally spread. Our first definition of this word gives one major reason why a person or group might want to spread wrong information, but there are many other nefarious motivations lurking behind the creation of disinformation. So that's important to understand those two differences between misinformation and disinformation. We all spread misinformation, get the wrong facts, think that for whatever reason it's true, but our intent is not to harm or change someone else's mind. It's simply that we've heard this stuff and that we plan to spread it accordingly. So there's this interesting article in The Conversation which talks about there's two examples of where this happened during the Voice campaign, and this is worth noting. The rules by which politics are conducted have changed dramatically, especially since the rise of Trumpism. I just hate the fact that we have to keep referring to Trump, for God's sake. Yet the professional mass media continue to cover politics in ways that are no longer fit for purpose. This has created distortions in the way the public discourse unfolds, distortions that have been on full display during the Voice referendum debate. And so we need to understand what this disinformation or these distortions actually are. And this is where the media needs to step in to be able to disseminate the distortions, the facts from the untruths. And the media, in my view, have failed dramatically in this regard for years now. We become almost desensitized, I think, to the misinformation and the distortions and the disinformation, particularly that is provided by certain actors in our community, particularly politicians. It presents a complex challenge to journalists and editors about how to simultaneously meet their obligations to truth-telling and impartiality, because there is now an unresolved tension between these two professional standards. That is, between the obligation to truth-telling and impartiality. I think that's really an important concept. Truth-telling requires that lies and misrepresentation are either not published or refuted. Impartiality requires the voices on all sides of a debate to be heard, especially if they are the voices of people in positions of power and influence. So what happens when influential voice on one side of the debate engage in obvious falsehoods? Now, they've got two examples of this, and that's the opposition leader Peter Dutton's allegation that the Australian Electoral Commission had rigged the referendum outcome by accepting ticks but not crosses as indicative of voting intention. And Senator Nangira Price claims that colonisation has had a positive impact on First Australian people. In the pre-Trump era, again, pre-Trump, bugger that, journalists could have counted on the self-writing process of politics to kick in, governed by conventions that repudiated gross falsehoods and imposed consequences. A completely baseless allegation by a leader of the opposition that the voting system was rigged, if this was in the past, will probably have finished his career on the grounds that he had undermined public confidence in the electoral process. And this is my point. My point is that the media no longer does this dissection between truth-telling and what is ethical and checking out the facts and then challenging organisations, people in particular, politicians I guess, for the fact that they're failing to tell the truth. And these two examples probably influenced a lot of people. You know, the other example clearly was, with regard to the referendum, was that people would have their land taken from them. And the media did a terrible job of challenging some of those ideas and putting that message out there that it was simply wrong. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're right or left in the media. The fact is that you need to challenge this. And there's a lot of people now in the media who just do, well, opinion pieces. Now, this is a YouTube channel. I do opinion pieces. I am not a journalist. I'm a social worker. So I'm about what is ethical, principled and valued. But there are a lot of people, journalists out there, who just push that aside. And there are a lot of people out there who call themselves journalists, but do a lot of opinion pieces that are often distorting the facts and providing disinformation. So the question really at the end of the day is, how do we deal with that? How do we manage some of this stuff so that we can better understand how to confront it, and how can we best protect ourselves from issues that are simply about distorting the truth? So these are the actions we can take. We can recognise the risks, understand how disinformation actors leverage these tactics to push their agenda, but we're wary of manipulative content that tries to divide. And this is so important in relation to, that this is a divisive campaign, that it's racist based, that it's dividing the country. All this stuff uses the word divide to start with, so we should have been wary of that in terms of the referendum here in Australia. Question the source. Critically evaluate content and its origin to determine whether it's trustworthy. Research the author's credentials, consider the outlet's agenda, and verify the supporting facts. And with some of these people, sometimes it's really difficult to do that. With Senator Price, for example, she's Indigenous. So her indigeneity all of a sudden gives her the authority to be able to talk about some of these issues from an Indigenous perspective, even though there were many people who disagreed with her on the Indigenous side as well. So should we have believed her with some of these facts? No. We should have checked them out, found out what Indigenous people said. And there might have been a divide, but then it's up to us to make the decision as to which side of that we want to rest on. Investigate the issue, conduct a thorough, unbiased search into contentious issues by looking at what credible sources are saying and considering other perspectives. Rely on credible sources of information such as government sites. And if you're a cooker, you're not going to trust government sites. You're never going to look to those particular areas. You're never going to look to stuff around health if it's to do with the vaccine, because you simply do not trust those sites in the first place. So you're kind of a lost cause. You're never going to be able to make the changes you need to make in order to change the thinking, because you're not a critical thinker. Think before you link. I really like this one. Slow down. I wished I'd done that. Don't immediately click to share content to see online. Check the facts first. Some of the most damaging disinformation spreads rapidly via shared posts that seek to elicit an emotional reaction that overpowers critical thinking. And the one I referred to earlier for me was really about an emotive response to something that I'd seen. And I simply just flicked it on when I shouldn't have. I should have waited a little bit longer, thought about it a little bit more, who was providing me with that information and whether it was overall factual or not. Talk with your social circle. Engage in private, and this is important, respectful conversations with friends and family when you see them sharing information that looks like disinformation. Be thoughtful what you post on social media. And so I guess at the end of the day, it's really about us understand two things, I think. It's about the media doing their job and doing it differently, and challenging disinformation and pull it apart and let people know what the actual facts are, and do it in an unbiased way. Ethical, unbiased, and make sure that those facts are presented. And journalists, unfortunately, fail us all the time in relation to those sorts of issues. So I hope that's been helpful to you. If you've got any challenges around any of that, please let me know. Put a comment down below, it would be really nice. Love to hear from you. I've heard from some people with regard to a post I put out about The Voice yesterday. Some of them weren't all that helpful. And I did get a post, incidentally, from someone whom I love. I think she's fabulous, but she has a completely different view of Jacinta Price and other people that I don't necessarily favour. And I guess that's the point, that it's okay. You can still care for somebody and you can still love them, regardless of the fact that they might have a completely different view to yours. I'm not going to change my view just because I care about this person and she's got a different view to me. I'm still going to sit by the principles and values that I believe are important. But I don't want to destroy that relationship. We will try and maintain relationships, even though you might have differences. I think that's a sensible way to be. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.